Right up until the 1980s, Germany had tough laws on who was allowed to make and market matches. The legislation was enacted on the 28th of January 1930 in order to secure a loan from a wealthy businessman. This is the story of the German Match Monopoly Act. The man in question was a Swedish businessman called Ivar Kreuger, the founder of a company which in 1917 was named Svenska Tändsticks, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly. It made matches, and it quickly dominated the Swedish, the European, and even the global markets. And I do mean dominated. By the early 1930s, the company controlled 85% of the production in Europe and 75% worldwide. This made Kreuger an incredibly wealthy man, and he became known as the Match King. It may seem strange to us today that you could make a fortune selling something like matches, but 100 years ago, they were an essential item that everybody needed. Smoking, of course, was very common in those days, but even non-smokers had fireplaces and gas appliances like cookers and even lights that had to be lit with matches. Kreuger's company swallowed up a lot of smaller companies and built modern factories so it could increase production and easily put rivals out of business with much lower prices. It also made important improvements to a relatively new technology, safety matches that could not be lit by accident. Not only that, but the company had business interests in other related industries as well. For example, forestry, mining, the chemical industry, the manufacture of matchboxes, even the railways. But Kreuger also engaged in some financial fraud to help grow his business. He wasn't exactly a saint. One biographer described his business practices as a Ponzi scheme, and certainly his manipulations were stunningly crude and blatant. But never mind, he was a very wealthy man, and in 1929 the German economy was in very bad shape. Kreuger made the German government an offer it couldn't refuse. He would offer Germany a loan of $500 million Reichsmark, which in today's money would be about $2 billion US dollars or 1.75 billion euros. He would charge 6% interest and expect everything to be paid back by 1980. In return, however, he wanted a full monopoly of match production in Germany. That's why the law was passed. It was one of the conditions of the loan. From the 1st of June that year, which was only about 4 months away, all matches in Germany had to be marketed by the German Match Monopoly Consortium, and it did so under about 13 different brand names, although by far the most common were the low-budget Haushaltsware and the high-quality Welthölzer. Manufacturers received quotas and produced exclusively for the consortium. The German government got 65% of the profits and Kreuger's company 34%, leaving only 1% for the manufacturers themselves. However, this did nothing to help Ivar Kreuger, whose improper financial dealings and his love of gambling caught up with him. In 1932, just before a meeting with the chairman of the Central Bank of Sweden in order to discuss his company's possible bankruptcy, he was found dead. His death was ruled suicide, although his family maintains that it was murder. Either way, that was the end of the Match King, but not of the loan to the German government. The final installment was paid on the 15th of January 1983, and that was the end of the monopoly. With the loan now paid off in full, Germany could finally open up match production to the free market economy. And that in turn meant a sudden collapse in the price of matches, which fell almost overnight by a third. Great news for consumers, not such great news for the smaller of the newly independent manufacturers. As for Kreuger's company, it still exists and is now called Swedish Match. As well as matches and lighters, it sells tobacco products and is now having to rethink its business model now that smoking is going out of fashion. Well, I hope you found this video illuminating. Anyway, like, comment, you know what to do.